you're told you can't, or you're told that there's a difficulty or a challenge. And it's about saying, well, actually, do you know what? I want it enough. And I do believe when we talk a lot about resilience, that it's very, very closely attuned, obviously, to purpose. And I think when we have a purpose and something that we're heading towards, it's easier to be resilient, because if you take a knockback, you think, how else can I get there? How else can I get there?
In this podcast, I'm going to be exploring what it takes to live a life full of adventure and freedom. I'll be interviewing adventurers, explorers, and business owners who have set their life up to have an abundance of choice. And I'm also going to give you the high performance tips and tricks I teach my adventurepreneur clients to have the kind of life they want and be the type of person they wish they were. So if you're not already, subscribe to the show and settle in for another episode of The Freedom Project. Welcome back to the Freedom Project podcast, where we explore the thrilling intersection of adventure and entrepreneurship. Today, we're super excited to bring you a special interview with Mandy Hickson, a true force of nature and an inspiration to all adventurepreneurs. Mandy's story is nothing short of extraordinary. As the only female pilot in her Front Line Tornado Squadron, she flew multimillion-pound jets for the UK Royal Air Force, navigating some of the most challenging environments you can imagine, including Iraq's no-fly zone. Her journey to these heights is a tale of true grit and determination, starting with a flying scholarship at 17 and winning an acrobatics competition as a student. Mandy faced a significant hurdle when she initially failed her mandatory computer-based tests, but undeterred, she fought her way through, showcasing her exceptional flying skills and earning her a place in the skies. But Mandy's expertise isn't just about flying fast jets. She's also a skilled human factors facilitator, offering invaluable insights into the decision-making under pressure, risk-taking, and the crucial role of humans in complex systems. These lessons are not just relevant in the cockpit, they're incredibly applicable to the business world and personal challenges alike. Also, Mandy has put her experience to great use off the field. She co-founded Inspiring Women for Work, helping women regain confidence and re-enter the workforce after taking a break. Her work here is a reflection of her commitment to empowerment and leadership. And in this episode, Mandy shares her incredible experiences and the lessons she's learned from the life in the fast lane. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or just someone seeking a dose of inspiration, Mandy's story is bound to resonate with you. So let's dive in and hear from the wonderful Mandy Hickson herself right here on the Freedom Project podcast. Get ready for a journey full of insights, inspiration, and the spirit of adventure. When did you decide that becoming, and this must be a question you've been asked 1,000 times, when did you decide that you're going to become a pilot?
Really young, actually. I think I was so blessed in many ways to find something that I love doing. And so I was 13 when I first got into flying through the air cadets. And when I flew, I just remember having a chat with the pilot and just saying, gosh, do you get paid for this? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. This is my job. And it was that in that moment really where I think I realized that if you can find a career that pays you as well, and it's something you love, then you're going to be successful in what you do. And for myself at the age of 13 to have that sort of insight, I think I was really, really lucky.
Yeah, that is a huge stroke of luck, actually. What I'm guessing there was some construction from parents or some kind of guidance from them?
Yeah, a little bit. So my grandpa was a pilot in the Second World War, and I grew up for a long time hearing all of his stories. And then when the air cadets opened their doors to girls, my mum happened to be reading it in the local paper. And I'd always been, in those days, we would call ourselves a tomboy, but I'd always been really active, very, very sporty. If there was a tree to climb, it would be me. I'd be the one that was covered in mud. And, I always loved that sort of sense of risk. And so I think when my mum saw about the air cadets, she thought, this would actually combine a lot of Mandy's hobbies. I mean, I love canoeing, outdoor pursuits, and they offered a lot of those sorts of things, all of that extra curricular stuff that if you don't go to a private school, you might not get on the classic curriculum at school. And so, yeah, when I did that and then the flying as the icing on the cake, then I actually it really spurred me on to want to go into that sort of world.
Was there anyone in your life who gave that example of someone who lives adventure and takes those risks?
What, leading him from the front?
Yeah, like any parental role. Obviously, your grandfather seems like one of those people.
Yeah, no, I mean, my mum, to be honest, so my mum and dad divorced when I was about 2. And I had a great relationship with my dad as well. So But what I saw from my mum, we had a caravan and it was an absolute heap of rubbish. It was the tiniest, I mean, there was no toilet or anything like that, you know. It was one of those real tiny boxes. But mum would take us everywhere on holiday. And we were always on an old car that had been literally given to us by someone that, you know, that was changing their car. And one of them was called a Hillman Minx. And it would always break down. And so every caravanning trip we'd ever go on would be spent in a garage on the side of a motorway with us going, Mom, and her going, it's all right, girls, don't worry. So I think that whole can-do attitude, you know, for her, you know, this was pre-mobile phones, this was pre-internet, this is pre any sort of connectivity. Her just to be saying, yeah, I'm going to take this caravan and these two little girls at the age of 3 and 5, and we're going to go. I think that was quite brave of her, really. And you know, we went to France, we toured round, we did all sorts. She was a teacher, so she used to get the summer holidays off. So we would take these really long holidays. And yeah, so I think that pioneering sort of adventurous spirit probably does come probably a lot from my mum.
Yeah, because I'm guessing some people fall in love with flying and then they go down the commercial route and that's what they
Yeah.
enjoy. And some people want to fly a tornado. Those are two
Yeah,
different
they are
paths.
quite different things, yeah. No, it was definitely going to be military for myself. I loved aviation, but it was not going to be in the commercial capacity. That really didn't appeal to me that much.
Mm,
And so, you know, it was sort of like military or bust, I think, in
yeah.
many ways.
What was it about the military that resonated with you?
Um, I think when you look at the military, you know, the whole ethos is that you're signing up to serve
Mm,
predominantly, and then the role that you take is secondary to that. And I think it's easy when you look back to say, yeah, but did you? But the reality is that when I first tried to join the Air Force and I failed all of the tests to be a pilot, they initially offered me a commission to become an air traffic controller. And I took that because I saw it as a foot in the door. Because actually, by then, I'd joined the University Air Squadron and I'd continued to fly. And they really, I wouldn't say sold the military, but they showed me what I loved, which was the camaraderie. I loved the leadership aspects of it. But that sense of team to myself was actually the thing that really drew me in. And obviously, becoming a pilot was going to be what I really wanted to do. But the fact that I actually even took that initial job as an air traffic controller probably demonstrates that it was being part of the military that was just as important as being a pilot as well.
yeah, because that's a somewhat significant setback in terms of you got a plan. How old were you when you had that kind of, I don't know, I'm going to say
Yeah.
setback for want of a better word.
Yeah, no, it was a setback. I was 21, so I
Mm,
failed them. Well, so when I was at university, they changed the rules allowing women to join because until that point, they'd never allowed you to join. And I applied and I failed the first year. And then I went back a second year, now in my final year, and I failed again. And that's when you start thinking, well, I can't do it more than twice. So the
mm,
door is well and truly shut. But I often say this is where sometimes it's really important other people believe in us. And I was really lucky, actually. A boss of the club, the University Air Squadron, obviously spotted something within me. I think not just for my flying ability, but also my leadership as well. So I was the president of the mess committee, like the student
mm,
president of
mm.
the University Air Squadron as well. And I think all of those things sort of came together, and he sort of really encouraged me and also pushed the Air Force to really look at their testing. And he said, how can this girl be flying really, really well in the air and not passing your tests? So the Air Force
Mm.
went on and actually took me on as a test case, and eventually the test did change.
Nice. What did you learn from that?
I think I learned that it's really important to have people that around you that believe in you, and to pass that on as well. And that's something that I really I it's a really, really core value to myself. That whole passing it on, there's plenty of slices of pie, and it's something that I just do all the time now to other people, really encouraging them. For example, in the speaking world now, you know, there's people that have come to me and I've said, actually, I'm going to give you all my information. I'm going to give you my contacts. And they say, this is really kind of you because you don't have to, and B, surely it's competition because, you know, we're pilots. And I was like, look, I don't mind because I truly believe what comes around goes around. So I think it's that sense of believing in other people and pushing them as well. And I think also to challenge systems and challenge, you know, is really important because if you don't have a challenge, we don't ever get change.
Yeah, because some people would have capitulated in that moment when they didn't get what they initially wanted. The plan goes against their
Yeah.
desires, and you seem to lean into that a bit. You seem to go, okay, well, there's a way. there's something that I can do with this.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, I think to learn that lesson really young is really important as well. So when I was 17, I applied for a flying scholarship and I was told I had an obesity problem. So at that point, I'd passed the aptitude test to get a flying scholarship. But I mean, I was what, 12 and a half stone. I was 6 foot tall and I was really sporty. And they said, you should be 9.5 stone. And I was like, okay. And
Oh,
they
the days of
literally said,
BMI.
I know, it's like crazy. The height charts went up to 5'8" for women, and they weren't adding any extra weight on for a
That's
six
great.
foot tall woman. And so they said, "Oh, you need to be 9." I had to lose 3 stone in weight. Now, when you're playing county sport and then you're told to lose 3 stone in weight, and I had 3 months to do it. Again, I was doing my A levels. I was head down. So I think that just shows me, though, in many ways, really, that determination. You know, you're told you can't, or you're told that there's a difficulty or a challenge, and it's about saying, well, actually, do you know what? I want it enough. And I do believe when we talk a lot about resilience, that it's very, very closely attuned, obviously, to purpose. And I think when we have a purpose and something that we're heading towards, it's easier to be resilient, because if you take a knockback, you think, how else can I get there? How else can I get there?
Hmm. Really nice. Really nice. So how did that lead you to actually getting invited to fly for the RAF?
Well, when I accepted the officer training, basically to become an air traffic controller, I was then in and I was going through officer training, and I continued to write letters basically to any high ranking officers that I thought would, listen to my case. But also the old boss was also still on the case. And eventually we just got this letter back. And I think the Air Force looked at their system and they realized that the majority of women that were taking these tests were failing them. And about 70% of men
Mm.
were passing. And so they realized that there might well be some unconscious bias within their testing system that they'd been unaware of, because they'd simply never been tested on women. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I was really very lucky to be taken on as a test case. But again, I think probably if it hadn't been for my determination and that perseverance, then I wouldn't have been lucky. And I think so often we say, oh, you're so lucky in life. It's amazing how people who are determined and pretty resilient end up being quite lucky.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I spoke to a pilot called Mace Curran, and she was, what's
Oh,
the
yeah,
US
mate.
version? Oh, you know Mace. Okay, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was speaking to her and about the kind of the image that she felt she had to portray as one of the first females to fly. I can't remember the US version of the Red
Thunderbirds.
Arrows.
Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds. There we go. Yeah, so she's was she first or one of the first females to fly for
She
Thunderbirds?
was she was the first in the,
Me.
like,
Yeah.
what we call the synchro pair.
Okay.
So
Yes.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
good.
So she felt that pressure of like, okay, I'm being treated differently because of my gender. Did you have any of that?
Um, yes, yeah. I mean, it was a different era when I joined, even to how it was for Mace. And actually, Mace and I was one of those people that I literally had an hour and a half Zoom call with her about how you get into the speaking world. So, yeah, it was a different world. I joined in 1994. Now, when you think about that, that's nearly 30 years ago. Culturally and society, it was a different place. The way that we thought about women and we perhaps treated women was a different world as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I was probably, I wouldn't say treated differently. There was always going to be the fact you were singled out. So perhaps going through
Mhm.
officer training, my team pulled out the fact that all the instructors would make a comment to me every single day about my gender, be it, oh, which jet is Mandy part? It's the one that's not straight. But they were all flippant comments, nothing malicious. I think I was really very lucky. I only had one incident of bullying in my entire career. Um, I do think I did become I tried to fit in too much at one point. I think I became a bit more laddie. So, sort of changing how we morph our behavior when we realize that we're just fitting in. And I think everyone does that to some degree. And I don't think that's always a gender thing. And I've
Mhm.
seen, young pilots, they'll join a squadron. For example, let's give you an example of a Harrier squadron. And there would be this inherent behaviors that were being exhibited by that squadron as a whole. And you watch a
Mhm.
young man morphing from, a really nice guy to suddenly being really laddie and, arrogant or whatever it was. And you think, why are you doing that? And it's just because that's human nature. We have that tendency to want to fit into the group, especially if it's a really strong core group. And so we morph. And that's what I think has changed massively from when I joined to how it is now. I think we're much more accepting. If you can imagine, people weren't allowed to be gay in the Air Force when I
Mhm.
joined. So one of my best friends was gay, and he wasn't allowed to be. He would have been thrown out had they
Mhm.
found out that he was gay. So, that's a different generation. And thank goodness things have changed.
Yeah, thank goodness. That it's crazy to even think about that. But that morphing is really interesting. And one of the things that I think is interesting to pull out from this already is you seem to have this determined this determined mindset of like, this is what I want, and I'll find a way to get that. And then you almost had that, well, I'm going to fit in, and I'm going to be the gray, well, the gray man. I'm not going to stand out. I'm going to be the, like, not
Yeah,
like, because we
I
all,
don't.
I did that in training, and like, you kind of, it's a game
Yeah,
to play. But there's
it
that,
is. I mean,
but writing letters to the hierarchy consistently to go, actually, you should reconsider me. That takes a level of confidence.
yeah, I think it's an interesting one though when you say grey man, because everyone had said to me, it's really important going through officer training that you're the grey man,
Mhm.
and then I'm 6 foot tall. I've got a really bad laugh. I mean, I'm, I'm quite.
Mhm.
I'm not quite. I'm as extrovert as it comes on the extrovert
Mhm.
scale. And, when you do the Myers Briggs, I'm like right out here, and everyone's going, "Really? You that extrovert?" I'm going, "Yeah, I probably am," which is why it works doing the job I do now, because I can go into any room and straight away I can just chat to people, and I actually energize from it. Whereas I think a lot of people find that very, very draining. So yeah, officer training, being the sort of person I was, when women were still meant to be women in those days. And, I was told I wasn't allowed to drink pints of beer, and I was told I was too Amazonian and I had to be more feminine. And I said,
Who by?
You're training me to, ultimately go and fly in a jet to go and kill people. And yet you want me to be more feminine at this point, going through officer training. I mean, it really annoyed me, that sort of comment of,
Yeah,
you, you, you can't have people joining the military who are going to be dainty wallflowers. It's
yeah.
just not going to work.
Yeah. Did you ever get used as like a poster girl of like, okay, well, look what females can do, look what the RAF is, and kind of used like the example that's come to mind is there's a book called Where Men Win Glory about Pat Tillman. So you know it, and like that
Yeah.
element of like, look what this is happening, like, and look at us, aren't we great?
I was really lucky, to be honest, Tom. So Jo Salter was the very first female fast jet pilot, and
Hmm.
so she got all of
She got all
that.
of it. Okay.
She got all of it.
Yeah.
And good luck to her. I didn't
Mhm.
particularly want that, but we were also. This is how sort of long the process. So Jo was just finishing officer training when they changed the rules, so she instantly flipped
Okay.
across from engineer to pilot.
Mhm.
So basically, almost on the day of them changing the rules, Jo could then almost start flying training because she was in the right mode and the right
Mhm.
place. For ourselves, it was going to be, I was in my second year at uni when they changed the rules, and then by the time we've been recruited, finished uni, been recruited, gone through officer training, we're actually almost 3 years behind her by then. And so there was this big gap, which was actually really quite nice because it meant that there was no sort of like special attention given to us whatsoever. So much so that when a girl called Helen came to the squadron, and she was a navigator, and we flew the first ever all female crew in a tornado. And the only coverage of it was me writing an article, and I used to have to write the article for the Marham Matters magazine. It's like a quarterly magazine for the
Mhm.
station, and I wrote "Two birds do it together in a tornado" as the headline because I thought this would be very funny and it might get the attention of the readers. She was furious with it, but and then all I simply said was two women have finally flown together in a tornado, and that was what Obviously, I left it at that. But what was hilarious was I was reading a newspaper article about 4 or 5 years later, and it's like history has been made. Two women have flown together in a tornado, and I thought that's interesting. That's how little the publicity was of interest to
Mm.
anyone at that stage.
Really interesting. Did that change at all when you started to be actively deployed?
No, no, head was down, and it's been fascinating actually now actually because I've been I'm on social media now. I do
Mhm.
public speaking, and somebody you often read these comments and it'll be like, when you serve in the military, you get your head down, you don't talk about it. And I said, and I never really respond to the negativity on social media. I can't be bothered. But on this occasion, I thought, actually, do you know what? I am going to comment on this one because I think it's really important. I served for 16 and three-quarter years, so nearly 17 years with my head down, and I did the job. But once I left the Air Force, I think actually I have a responsibility now to the future generations, particularly of women wanting to come through, to be visible and to talk openly about the career that I've had. Because I think that by raising that visibility to people, then ultimately you can be that role model for them. And it's
Mm.
certainly working because I've been contacted by so many young women, young girls who are keen to go into this world and they just want the advice. And it's been great because I think my book actually ended up as a catalyst for that because it can be read by anyone from, I would say, secondary school upwards. And so it's it gained a lot of media attention and a lot of contacts that have come through social media from pilots in America going through the flying training system that have said, oh, I read the bit about you doing these battle turns and it's the thing I was failing and she's now flying the F-35, and this is brilliant. So stuff like that is just fantastic. I literally, it really excites me that I can have, a small part to play in the future of so many young people these days.
It's so interesting how people have that negative response to someone standing up and doing well. I think there's obviously a little bit of jealousy or envy in there, but there's also like you can completely tell the intention of the person writing and to some degree publicizing themselves about whether they are doing it to, yes, there's always going to be an element of personal gain when you say this is what I'm doing and you're promoting a speaking thing, but when you're doing it to serve other people and with a greater purpose in mind, whereas you can absolutely tell the people are saying, look how brilliant I am, look
Yeah,
what I've done.
completely. Yeah,
And
and
it's
I think it is a really fine line, don't you think? And it's interesting because I do all my social media side of it, and that's one thing. But for example, Instagram, I'm not bothered about being on Instagram. I'm really not. But that's where you can have an influence on younger people
Mhm.
because they're not on other social media platforms. They're not on Twitter or Facebook, particularly. So if you're wanting to actually be visible, then I think you need to have a presence on those sort of social media platforms. And so it's that fine line of actually, I gain no speaking work whatsoever from being on Instagram.
Mhm.
However, that's where you can have an impact.
Beautiful, beautiful. One of the things I really want to talk to you about is the the key lessons and principles that you might be able to apply from your career into the world of business. I know it's something you talk about consistently, but before we get to those kind of exact principles, are there stories or memories that run through your mind of like, oh, this is another one of those? This is something that I saw in the military and now I apply, whether it's consulting businesses or speaking or in your own personal development.
Yeah, I think the military debrief really well. The fact that I mean, you'll have experienced this yourself as well. Something happens and you instantly say, right, let's pull that apart. Let's really get to the cause. How we be better. And every single flight I've ever flown in the military, we debrief it. And yet I say to businesses, do you debrief? And it's often seen as a post mortem or a negative thing.
Mhm.
And I say, you can't, that's not how it can be. Even if you're just having quick debriefs at the end of a meeting and just ask yourself, like, what went well and what went badly, what can we do more of, how can we improve? And that constant agility to improve comes from analyzing our behaviors. And so that debrief technique is a really good one. And I
What's
think
your
the other
exact protocol for that, or do you have a flow for that?
yeah, I mean, it's actually a classic one from Central Flying School, which was taught to everybody, and it's this funnel, and it says basically what happened, what are the facts, why did it happen, what's the cause, but how is at the bottom, which is the cure. And it's about basically trying to pick out two or three key elements and really doing a deep delve into those areas. And I think if you go for many more than three, it's too overwhelming. And so
Mhm.
once you've established the facts, and I say facts are your friends, they can't be debated. So we're going to pick out those facts and then actually ask really open, facilitated questions, trying to avoid the blame aspect of the who did that,
Mhm.
because as soon as you say who, it's almost like, there's this fear response. And so actually by asking the what, where, when, how, actually you're getting down. And then once you've established what it is you're trying to improve, you say, okay, was that really good behavior? Because if it was good, well, how can we replicate that then?
Mhm.
And I think that's one thing that's so often overmissed is that people often only debrief when things go wrong. But I'd
Yeah.
say also debrief when things go right.
Yeah, because there's a three-step kind of process from special forces world of like what went well, what didn't go well, and what would we do differently
Yeah.
if we did it again. So it's like the first thing is what went well, and it's like some people have this. blinder on where it's like I'm so distracted by the negativity that I forget the 25 things that actually went really well. And one thing could be awful, but it's still that's
Yeah.
the primary focus. I suppose the 25 things did well, and other people will complete the other way as well. They have that switched up. So yeah, I'm guessing you focus on both at the same time.
Yeah, you do, but human nature dictates that if there's one negative comment. So I think when I look at my book, and this is not me sort of doing a sell, but there's been like 2,500 5-star reviews, and then there's one star review which said
Yeah.
something like this. I can quote you. This is female Nazi propaganda. And
Yeah,
I
I'm
was like,
sorry for
hey,
writing that. I won't write that again.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
really?
Yeah, sorry.
I couldn't help myself with going, how dare they? There's nothing Nazi-ish in this, and it's not propaganda, it's my life story. And so I could feel myself, but the fact is, I can quote you that one, not the 2,000
Yeah.
5-star lovely comments, because human nature says, focus on the negative, and when you look at school results, and we do this as well, but with our children, where you get a report and you get 9 A stars and you get 1 E. What is the comment going to be? What was the E in?
Yeah.
It's just terrible that we do that, but we all do it. We all do it.
Mhm.
Even as a parent, I do that as well. And, I have to catch myself.
If you're an adventurepreneur and you want more freedom to do more cool shit, then I want to help you do that. Every month, I take on a maximum of 3 new clients into my high-performance adventurepreneur program. This is a completely bespoke, personal, and deep dive program giving you complete freedom, teaching you high-performance mastery. It's application and invite only, and I accept only those who are the best fit for the program. To apply for your space, head to my Instagram, Tom Foxley, Foxley, and send me a message with the word interested. Of course, and you have to be able to do it, but I think we're in a luxurious position now where we have to remind ourselves to go, okay, remind yourself of what you've done well. So one of the concepts that has come from the US military and then transferred over to the UK, particularly in the Air Force, and that has affected the world of business is the OODA loop. Obviously, you don't need me to explain that to you, but for everyone who's listening, observe, orient, decide, and act. It's something that people would have heard over and over and over again. Are there other frameworks that you utilize consistently?
Yeah, so and one that we use within aviation, probably a little bit more than the OODA loop, and it's been used within our crew resource management principles as well. And it's our decision-making model called TDODAR. And the first thing we do is we say, how much time do we have? And then the first thing we do is we diagnose the problem. You ask your team for options. You get all of the input. Then you, as the leader, make the decision. That's the decide, assign the tasks, and then review it. And that's obviously the same as the OODA, as in the review stage as well. So you've got that loop going round. So it's a similar principle to the OODA loop. But yeah, it just incorporates that sense of how much time do we have as well, because I think people can procrastinate a lot over decision making. Whereas actually, if you just think, you know what, we're going to make this decision in 5 minutes, let's get on with it. And I think businesses as well, actually knowing where you are within a decision making cycle is actually really helpful too. So yeah, I think the OODA loop is good. And then, TDODAR as well is quite good.
That element of time is really interesting. When has that been useful for you?
Certainly when you're flying a mission. So I've had missions in Iraq where I was leading and something happened. We were actually engaged by a missile. And instantly we went, we've got 3 minutes. We very quickly worked out that, time is of the essence. And when you're focused on something, what you tend to find is that our ability to analyze how much time we have disappears completely. So there's been so many experiments done on this psychology wise, where basically if people are task orientated and focus on something and they ask how long have they been doing it for, they'll often say minutes, and it can be sometimes 20 minutes. They will guess it's around 5. That's how far out your estimate of time is. And it's because it's like if you're doing anything, you're sort of think, well, just very quickly focus and write this email, and you look up and you think, oh my gosh, how's that hour gone? That sort of task fixation, which gives us tunnel vision. So I think that having an idea of how much time you've got is really important.
You can't leave us on that cliffhanger of we had a missile fired at us and we had 3 minutes.
That's quite. In fact, I might give that to my son as a Snapchat or whatever it is, Instagram thing. He's doing my social media for me. So I was leading my first ever combat mission, and we were literally just sweeping up our last target. We were just doing what's called a show of force over Iraq at the time. and we were engaged by a heat-seeking surface-to-air missile. And it's really unusual. They normally would always be fired in a radar mode. And my apologies. And basically, in this occasion, it was sent in heat-seeking mode. And basically, suddenly, my navigator just shouted to me, brake right. And instantly, I just carried out the action that I was meant to do, which is basically going back to idle on my throttles, turning the aircraft through 120 degrees and pulling hard towards the ground. And he put the flares out, and we were really lucky that the missile took the flares and it exploded about 2 miles away from us, which felt like quite a near miss. And then at that point, we were given a retasking because there was quite a few aircraft, I think up to about 80 aircraft airborne from 4 different countries around the Gulf. And we all had we were working closely with the Americans at this stage. This was in the run up to Gulf War II. And everyone had different roles and responsibilities. But once an aggressive act had been made towards any of the coalition forces, then we were basically given a task to prosecute an attack on a target. And we were very quickly running out of fuel. So using TDODA, we decided that we would head south to an airborne tanker where we managed to refuel successfully. I did not manage to refuel. It was a tanker that I'd never tanked from before, so an American KC-135, and I wasn't cleared to do it. I'd never tried in daylight, let alone at night in a war zone when you've just been shot at. And after 2 attempts, I stepped across and let my boss and my senior executive officer refuel. They went back into Iraq. They located the target, and I landed back at base, and I felt like a real failure. But it's in those moments where all your learning takes place, because my biggest learning that night actually was around the empowerment of the team and the leadership side of it, because my boss had sat there very quietly as my number 2, and he hadn't interjected, he hadn't sort of tried to take over. But that's something that you would appreciate as well from the military background, is the fact that that's what you do in the military. If someone's leading, they are leading throughout. We don't see that in business. We see someone in a junior position being given a role and a task and a job to do. And then when the complexity gets, more and more intense, the boss will often just step in and say, right, you're out of your depth, I'm going to take over. But if you do that, it's completely disempowering that person. And so it's about creating that environment whereby, you're giving people the tools, the experience to let them grow, but without suffocating that growth. And that's what empowerment looks like. And that was really my biggest lesson when I look back that night.
Yeah, there's 2 points that I want to bring out of that. One of them, I think I could probably guess the answer to, but I'd be really interested to hear what you think. How do you keep calm in a moment where you have a missile fired at you, or you're under threat like that?
Training. I'd say it's 100% training. I think it's phenomenal. So you're not just trying something for the first time and thinking, oh, let's just try something. These are drills that you've done time and time again. And that's why we spend so much time in the simulator as well, and also just practicing flying. So every single trip that you would fly in the UK before that, someone would suddenly shout something like brake right or missile left 2 o'clock, and you would instantly just do a maneuver when you're least expecting it. And by building up that basically automatic pilot response, so that people often say, people are so dictated to by checklists and procedures and protocol when you're flying, but what they are doing by following those procedures which have been drummed into you, you're creating an automatic program of response. So you're not just reacting to things. And because you've planned for it, because you've trained for it, when something happens, you're not just thinking, oh my goodness, and you're not going into firefighting mode.
Were there any moments where you had to break protocol, where you had to kind of, I don't want to say think creatively, but think outside of the standard SOP?
I think I probably have had emergencies that you've handled whereby, I think, was it one night? I'm just trying to think actually, where something happened and actually we were caught right in between 2 airfields, and it probably dictated it's landed your nearest suitable. And we went for one that was slightly further away because we worked out we would have better facilities on the ground to sort out our problem. So that's not dictated to that you're following the drills exactly. And someone could have debated and said, well, you really should have gone to that one. But ultimately, that's you using your experience and your knowledge to try to think about the bigger picture. So when we talk about situational awareness, we often use this acronym called NUTTER: notice it, understand, and think ahead. And I like that one as well, because I think so often, when something's going wrong on a minor level, we don't often notice that initial stage. And if you're missing the initial stage of something, you certainly can't understand it and can't think ahead. So that would be a classic example whereby something had happened, an emergency, but we were understanding the nature of the emergency and therefore applying our logic to that.
The other thing you mentioned there that I'd love to explore is you said about how you dealt with failure. What failures have taught you the most?
Um, I failed many, many times actually in my life. And I think it's about being unafraid to fail. I think you will often fail when you're putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, or when you're working at the edge of your capability. Um, and I think, interestingly, and I can frame it as a failure because it was. When I left the Air Force, I was really aware that when I'd had my children and then gone back into the Air Force post maternity leave, I'd felt my confidence had taken a real dip. And I really thought and worried about, was my brain up to it? Was my confidence just wasn't there? And so I didn't want other women to go through that. And so when I left the Air Force, I'd had this vision to set up a company called Inspiring Women for Work. And it was basically about really, exploring the fact that confidence is a muscle and it just needs to be exercised, so that if people had, and particularly women, had taken a career break, be it through a sabbatical, be it through maternity, or perhaps being a carer, whatever it was, when they stepped back into the workplace, that we were going to give them that launch pad to actually reboot their confidence, so when they stepped back in, they could, go back in at full throttle. And the first session we ran, it was a 2-day session. We had 60 women. I had 10 life coaches, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, phenomenal feedback. And then the second event I ran, I could barely sell a seat on this course. And I was thinking, why? And I'd had so much media coverage for the first one. It's a wonderful story. Fast jet pilot, left the Air Force, now wants to help other women, and all of this sort of thing. So it had been picked up by a lot of national magazines and local newspapers as well. And then for the second one, of course, it was down to me. And it was at the same stage that my motivational speaking business was starting to really take off. And I thought, I'm spending all my energy on Inspiring Women for Work. And so I decided that I wouldn't run the second one, and I stopped doing the business. And what was interesting, I felt like a failure, but it was also about recognizing when is the time to stop, and when is it time to focus your energy on the right thing at the right time. And so that was a really, really important lesson to learn. And that actually came from a friend of mine who is a business owner himself. And he said, Mandy, if it's not working at this point, I think you need to focus your energies on what is working, and how you can make the most impact and make the most difference for people.
And that's a really painful decision, because there's a little bit of ego attached. There's I don't want to give up. I've been very determined and resilient throughout my whole life, and I get things done. And I think the big difference that I've thought that I've had to reconceptualize since time in the military, learning how to interact and learning these ethos that I'm going to represent in every action I possibly can, and then entrepreneurship, is head down, grind, suffer is very, very useful in a lot of applications in the military, and just get it done no matter the cost and suffer through it. And you get taught a hell of a lot of that in the Royal Marines, of just go, 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 go. And then you transfer to entrepreneurship, and it's, if something doesn't work, kill it and move on to the next thing straight away as quickly as you humanly can. And that's a very different skill set.
It is, and it's a different mindset. I think that's the whole thing as well. And I think when you've come from the military, where it, as you say, your determination is what gets you to the end point. It's almost like that feeling of you thinking, God, I'm, and also I put in so much passion into it. I was really genuinely passionate about this thing, and I got a business partner, and we'd got, we'd sorted out business bank accounts, and we'd had all this media attention, and then it was like, actually, that's not really working. And I was like, it really felt, this is not in my nature to give up. But it was this business owner that said, Mandy, business is different. And I was like, okay, that is fine to do that. But that was a really hard lesson, actually.
And that phrase there, giving up, is it really giving up, or is it the step forwards? And that's the difference that I think you learn to embody after a while. And yes, a really tough thing. Really
Yeah,
lovely.
definitely.
When did you decide to? So you decided to leave. When did the kind of exploration of Kilimanjaro and Everest Base Camp come into things?
So I was great friends. I'd done a really great event with a good friend of mine, Shardy, and it was called Attitude at Altitude. And so it was taking her story as an explorer in expeditions. So she climbed Mont Blanc and the Matterhorn, and she was wanting to do Kilimanjaro, and she wanted to do it with 20 women. And she'd asked me, would I like to go? And I thought, you know what, it's exactly what I was missing, because I'd gone from all the camaraderie and you know what it's like, that sense of team and spirit, to working by myself, building a successful business, traveling a lot, meeting a lot of people, but not forging that length and that sort of depth of relationship. And so when she said she was doing Kilimanjaro, that's what really appealed to me. And having something to focus on. So training, going on really long walks. And I loved it. Met all the girls. There was quite a few from around my area came with me on the expedition as well. And we did it in October 4 years ago. And it turned into probably one of my most challenging experiences, which,
What made
considering,
it so challenging?
well, firstly, the weather was really rubbish. And it was, so every afternoon it was literally pouring down with rain, which was really unusual for October. And so we're obviously camping as well at altitude, and it's cold. So when I think it was on the evening of or night 4, and we're going to be summiting on the night of night 5. So you're going to leave the tents at midnight of night 5. Anyway, night 4, I was up all night with horrific stomach issues of the downwards variety.
Fun.
And fun. I mean, it felt in the morning as if literally I'd been hit by a bus. I don't think I've ever felt that ill and so drained. I don't think I'd slept a wink. And then you're going to be walking all day, going to sleep for a couple of hours, then getting up at midnight and then walking up. And it's going to take about 6 hours to get to the summit at sunrise. And they said, Mandy, I don't think you're going to be fit enough. And I went back to my sort of control the controllables feeling to it. What can I do about it? And I thought, there were a couple of doctors there with us as well, and they were like, take a lot of Imodium. So literally, I think I took about 30 Imodium. Nothing was stopping it. And I had about 8 liters of water, so at least I was hydrated. But my energy levels were 0. And when we opened the tents to start, getting ready, we'd been told it was going to be a clear night, and a freak storm had come in, and it was complete whiteout. Really thick snow on the ground, and the weather was horrific. And one of the Sherpas said it was his worst weather conditions he'd seen in his 300 summit attempts. So he said in all those summits, there's been 4 times that he's experienced that weather, but he said that was the worst.
Wow.
And it took us 9 hours to get to the summit. We got there at about 8:45, and I was drained, and I literally burst into tears, and we couldn't see anything. It was complete whiteout. It was like a ski resort at whiteout. So there we are at the summit, rooftop of Africa, no view. And then it was slippy. So I was on my bottom almost the whole way down, sort of going, sliding down. You didn't have crampons or any sort of, suitable footwear really for walking on snow. And by the time we got back, we got back so late, we didn't have time to then go to bed. Normally you would get back and have breakfast and go to bed for about 4 hours. We literally got back, I threw up absolutely everywhere. There was nothing left to give. And also, you're in a snow blizzard whilst you're having a lot of motions, which was not pleasant. So it was probably the singular most, well, let's just say, resilience I'd had to show on my determination to achieve a goal, because there was no way I was not going to do it. No way in the world. And yet I was literally through the eye of a needle, excuse my French, the whole way up.
That sounds very tough.
Yeah, it was not pleasant. And of course I ended up therefore by myself for most of that walk, because the team were all moving up en masse, but every time I had to take myself off the beaten track to go to the loo, I had to take all my kit off each time, and then they'd gone. And I would try and walk really quickly, which you can't really when you're summiting at 5,500 meters. I'd catch them up, and they'd already had their break, and then they were leaving. And so it was really demoralizing sort of mentally. And at one point, I just said to this one guy, Musa, who was with me, I said, I think I'm broken. He went, you are strong, you are powerful. And I said, yes, but I have just pooed on my glove. At which point he just started laughing and he went, it's fine. I was like, it's not fine. That's the lowest point I've ever been. So yeah, that was the moment.
Fantastic. You're still getting into the mountains fairly frequently then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
Didn't put
did
you off that
Everest Base
much?
Camp. No, definitely not. No, I did Everest Base Camp in April this year with my husband, actually, and also with 6 gentlemen from Wigan. And as they said, it's been a cultural experience, but not of the Nepalese variety. And they were brilliant, actually. I took some very different lessons from Everest. One was, I think, don't judge a book by its cover, because it was a very, very different team dynamic. Kilimanjaro, I'd known the majority of the girls before we went out there. And on this one, I only knew my husband. And then we met these guys on the first night, and they were as broad Wigan accents, and there were real characters, some very strong characters in there. And I think it was interesting. They probably thought, "Oh, who are these middle class wankers?" Is what they said. Actually, I'm not to be rude, but which was ironic because I'm from Manchester and grew up about 20 miles from them. So I was like, "Yeah, that doesn't really fit." But they were really different characters, and what was really nice was breaking each of them down and not taking them as a mass of 6 guys. They were very, very different within their group. And actually, when you end up just talking to them all individually and having those conversations, they were fantastic guys. And that was a real wake-up call. Don't judge a book by its cover, Mandy. On that first meeting, it's easy just to think this is what they're going to be like, and they weren't like that at all.
Yeah. How did these all prepare you for, I suppose, one of the biggest shifts in identity that you can encounter, which is becoming a mother? Because you have to, that was obviously, I'm guessing, pre-Kilimanjaro, pre Everest Base Camp, but was it post-military or at the end of your military career?
Coming towards the end of my military career, I had
Okay.
a couple of years left, actually. So I left my frontline tour and then had my children on a ground tour. And then I went back and I did a second line tour in direct support of tornado operations when I had my children. So they were very close together in age, just 17 months between 2 boys. And that was probably one of the most challenging experiences, and still continues to be. Now they are 19 as of yesterday and 20, and they're 6'6" or 6'5" and 6'4", and they're massive. And yeah, they're fun, but it's still challenging being a mum. It's just different.
How did you deal with the identity shift, or I suppose it's like an identity bolt-on, or there's something that shifts with your responsibilities and the way
Yeah.
you must perceive yourself at that time?
I think it's about how we perceive risk, actually, was probably the biggest thing that I noticed that changed for myself. Was because before I used to always think, if I die, it's only my husband would obviously be quite upset, but it's only my boyfriend, my sister, my family, my friends. No one is dependent upon you. And the second you have children, you suddenly think, if something happens to me, that's going to change their lives forever. And therefore your perception of risk and how you regard it also changed for myself. I'd always been, I love risk. I mean, that's why I love skiing. It's why I love to ski fast. I like putting myself outside of my comfort zone. And suddenly, actually, it made me think I need to just be a little bit more careful. So, it was just interesting.
Was that a conscious decision, or was that something that kind of went, okay, this is just the only option to me?
It wasn't a conscious decision, no, but I just noticed that, I don't know, even in my flying, I start to think, and even, for example, mountain biking, I love mountain biking. I might be the slowest uphill, but my goodness, I'll probably be the fastest downhill because I love the speed. I love that. Oh, I'm right on the edge of comfort. And I've now noticed as well, you just think, oh, if I come off now, this is going to really ruin the rest of the year or whatever it is. And I've started to just, maybe it's age, to be honest, Tom. You're still young, you've still got it all in front of you. Naive, throw yourself down mountains, don't care. That's the way forward.
Yeah. No, there's definitely as you encounter more responsibility, there's definitely a shift
I
in
think that's
longevity of thinking, and thinking, long term rather than the short term kind of immediate gratification of throw yourself off something. Cool. And
no,
the final thing I
definitely.
want to touch on is writing, and how you came to to write your book, and what the process of writing was like for you.
It's a really, really good question, because writing and English were never my strong point. So I was maths, STEM, all that side of things. And I'd had it in my head that I wasn't a writer. So when people used to say, "Are you going to write a book?" Because that was the one question I always got
Mhm.
asked, I'd always say, "No, no, no, I can't write." And then I started to say, "Not yet." And this is such a lovely little bit of learning, because I realized as soon as you start to say "not yet," you're reframing what is possible. And you're opening that door, and suddenly you're thinking, "Oh, maybe I should." And then as soon as you think, "Maybe I should," then it's, "How can I?" Well, actually, I'm not a writer. And so what I did was I worked really closely with a great friend of mine who was a journalist and an excellent writer. And one of my great friends from university, and he absolutely loved the military as well and knew of my career, loved flying. And so the two of us worked really closely hand in hand, and we wrote An Officer Not a Gentleman together. And when I sent it out then to all the publishing houses, and it was rejected by all of them, which was really annoying. But the best rejection email said, "Plain books for a male readership with no interest, who have no interest in a woman's story," which I just thought, which frustrated me beyond belief. But so I in the end, I chose to self-publish it on Amazon, and I found a local publicist or printer here in Winchester where I live, and I literally went in and said, how do you go about printing a book? And he said, "Well, you normally would do a print run of 100." I said, "Oh, I was thinking a bit more, maybe 500." He went, "Oh, no, 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 no. No one has ever sold 500 books that I've printed." Anyway, so I went for 500. Actually, I went for 100, actually. And then the next order was for 1,000, and then the next one was for 5,000. So currently he's printed, I think, something like 10,000 books for me. And he just can't believe his luck. And when I said, "Oh, I might be going on a publishing deal," and he said, "No, please don't. Literally, you're keeping me in business, Mandy." But yeah, so it's really nice, actually. So I then can sell my book directly to all my clients that I do speeches for, but also it's available on Amazon for print on demand. So it's sort of the best of both worlds, because I've got complete control over the publishing rights of the book and everything about it.
What did you learn through writing? Because there's an element of writing where you're discovering, or you're not necessarily discovering something, but you conceptualize things and you wrap things up neatly in stories. Was there
Yeah.
anything that was surprising to you?
It's very cathartic, because the one fantastic thing being a pilot is you have a logbook, and every single flight you've ever flown in the military has been logged. And so there are details on those ones as well. So for example, on flights in Iraq, it will have, I don't know, near miss, you know, whatever it was, or it was a target running near Baghdad. And therefore, because you've got that literal day-to-day diary, it stimulates all of those thoughts. And so that was really just encouraging for the process, and really interesting to go back in detail over missions, and looking at things like threat and error management, which is something we talk about a lot within aviation, and think, "Oh, this was like the perfect storm." We would call it the Swiss cheese model when we look at error management and threats. And actually, it was all like the holes in my cheese had aligned, and I could almost see this disaster of this trip, and thinking, gosh, it's not until you analyze it and you want to take the learnings from a flight that, as you're writing it down, that you start to actually realize, my goodness, that's how training works, and that's why we didn't die on that occasion. But I also learned that the publishing world is incredibly slow and very, very frustrating. And it
Mhm.
just seems that, when you can do things like Amazon print on demand, when you're then going and getting a publishing deal and it's going to take 2 years, and they say, "Yeah, we'll take the book and we'll look at getting it out in 2 years' time." You think, really? That frustrated me. And actually, I much prefer to go a bit quicker than that.
Especially when you're someone who aligns themselves with adventure and freedom, and like even the concept of flying is
Yeah.
without limitation through like your standard dynamics. Like it's someone that really wants to go quickly and
Yeah,
explore. So
absolutely.
that's fantastic. Where can people book you for speaking, follow you on social media, get the book?
Yeah, so pretty much on all social medias, I'm either Mandy Hickson or Mandy Hickson Speaker. So on Facebook, it's Mandy Hickson Speaker, Instagram, Mandy Hickson Speaker, Twitter, I think Mandy Hickson, and LinkedIn as well. But I have my own website, which is, I'm going to shock you now, Tom.
What could it be?
It's going to be www. Mandy Hickson .com.
Good branding.
So yeah, and the book, you know, if you wanted to direct one, you can buy it through the website or just go on Amazon as well, and they can do print on demand, and you get it next day. So the options are numerous.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me. Really
It's
appreciate
been
it.
a pleasure. Thanks so much, Tom.